Howdy, and welcome to the Aggie Teach Momentum podcast, brought to you by the Aggie Teach Arts and Sciences program at Texas A&M University. I am your host, Kenric Davies, former high school physics and astronomy teacher and current program manager for Aggie Teach Arts and Sciences. This podcast is meant to provide a little more insight and information to those seeking a secondary content teacher certification in Texas. We aim to provide episodes that help pre-service educators on the path to certification, as well as leverage the experience of myself and other guest speakers to support teachers in the first few years in the classroom. And today's topic is one that's been on my mind for a little bit, and one that actually grew out of a book that I read to my son that had to do with coming to terms with failure and moving past it. And it had to do with what we call a growth mindset. And this has become a term that has gained a lot of notoriety in the education circles to describe the mindset that we hope students have when they encounter something difficult in the classroom. But I'm actually going to start off in a different spot that I think is going to be more important to the lives or the work that a pre-service teacher is doing now or an early career teacher going into the classroom. And that is the danger of the teacher having a fixed mindset. So, to back up a little bit, right, we kind of have two sides to this coin. We have the growth mindset and we have the fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is going to be something along the lines of we're all born with a certain set of skills, and those skills are sort of innate in us, and we can't develop anything more than what we have already. This is going to present itself in the classroom like seeing a student who's really good at math and saying, oh, that's a math person. Seeing a student who's really good at reading, saying, oh, that's a reading person, and then not connecting the skills across content areas. Like, okay, the math person's always going to be a good math person and maybe not so hot in other things, and the reading person's never going to be good at math, right? That is what we kind of consider to be a fixed mindset. We see this a lot in math specifically, where a person can say, "Oh, well, I'm not a math person," right? That's a fixed mindset sort of scenario where a person is acknowledging that they'll never be able to be good at math, that they are just not innately equipped to be able to handle the problem-solving skills or whatever it happens to be, right? That's a fixed mindset. So a growth mindset would be on the opposite side of that, which would be, okay, I may not be good right now, but if I work at it and I develop my skills, then at some point in the future, I'm going to be able to be good at whatever skill it is. And, a lot of times we sort of think about this around playing an instrument, right? I mean, you pick up a recorder in the elementary school, and of course those are really terrible instruments at the beginning, but eventually you learn a little bit how to use it, and you can play hot cross buns or something on it, right? Whenever I was in elementary school, I picked up the violin, and I can tell you that when I first started playing the violin, I was not good, obviously, and my skills progressed. And in high school, I played, in the all-city orchestra. I wasn't ever great at it, but that's because I wasn't putting in all of my effort to learn playing the violin, really, really well. I was putting my effort someplace else. So from a teacher standpoint, what we have to worry about is when we look at our students in the classroom, we're standing up there on day one, and we see all these bright young faces in front of us, not developing quickly a mindset where, oh, Johnny in the back row who's already got his head down on day two is never going to do anything for me in this classroom, and I might as well just not even try. That's a fixed mindset, right? That is saying, I already have pegged that student as a particular type of student, and I'm going to have issues with them all year long, okay? Or thinking about, okay, I have my student group over here who seems to make 100 on every test, so I'm just going to expect that out of them for the rest of the year. That is a fixed mindset. The danger of this is that when we have a fixed mindset that has low standards, right, low expectations, then all we're doing is providing a low bar for students to achieve, and then there's no push, there's no drive, either external or internal, for them to achieve any more. Right, that is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it can be that way on both sides. And there's actually something that comes out of research called the Pygmalion effect, which is also called the Rosenthal effect, that talks about the psychologists that started to do some experimental research on this, which is essentially like if you have high expectations of a group of, say students or a group of people or even mice in a laboratory, if you have high expectations of them, and you support them in those high expectations, then they will achieve higher outcomes. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because if they achieve higher outcomes, then they're going to have more confidence going into the next set of difficulties, in which case they're going to have more of an internal drive to attack those head on and persevere through them and then achieve higher outcomes, and which gives them more confidence, and it just goes back around and round and round. This was actually experimentally sort of shown, and I've referenced mice earlier. So one of the early experiments was about having two sets of groups that were both given the same or very similar sets of mice, and they were supposed to coax them through a maze to achieve some sort of objective. But one group was told that they had, mice that had less cognitive abilities. The other ones were told that they had exceptional mice. And of course, the exceptional mice did really, really well. And the ones that were perceived to be lower in cognitive ability didn't do as well at all. And it turns out that they were all the same sort of mice, right? There was no differences between them. Robert Rosenthal with his colleagues went and extended this into a classroom where they had two groups of students that had virtually similar cognitive IQs and abilities and things like that. But one set of teachers were told that they had students that were had higher IQs, right? So they had higher cognitive abilities. And of course, those students were not actually of higher IQ in terms of randomization across the experimental trial. But after a while, those students they began to excel. And it wasn't necessarily because they had the higher cognitive ability. It was because the teachers were focusing on them and setting higher expectations on there. So there's a link, and you can go as far as to say maybe a causal link between the higher expectations of a peer or a source of authority to the achievement in the classroom. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the same can go for lower expectations, right? If we have low expectations of our students, then we're not surprised when they don't meet those low expectations. And this is sometimes referred to as the Gollum effect, or at least that's what Wikipedia says, which is kind of the opposite of the Pygmalion effect. So us as teachers have to be really careful about this. And I don't know if I ever had a situation where I received students into my class where there was a stigma on the student. Like I didn't have any teachers ever come to me and go, "Oh, watch out for Jessica because she's a real handful." Never had anything like that happen. But I did have students that would put their head down in class, and I had to sort of fight the unconscious thoughts about, oh, well, I mean, that student just doesn't care about what's going on in class, because there's several other things that could be the reason why that student put their head down in class. And so it may just be that I had to take a special interest in that particular student to make sure that they were doing what I needed them to do and they were learning what I needed them to learn. One way that this kind of shows up in the educational setting is in the teacher's lounge. And if you are new into education, you may have already been warned that you kind of want to stay out of the teacher's lounge, especially around lunchtime, because teachers talk. And I feel like that saying is over dramatizing what happens in the teacher's lounge. I think what it is a cautionary tale that sometimes there are teachers in the field that have a fixed mindset about students, and they like to complain about students. They like to complain that so-and-so is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they had heard so many bad things about this student, and they were living up to all those expectations. And as a new teacher, sometimes you feel like you can't talk out against the veteran teacher who's complaining about students. So sometimes it's easier just to kind of remove yourself from the situation. So not eating lunch in the teacher's lounge where this complaining is happening. A good department or a good group of teachers is going to sit around the lunch table and talk about, I don't know, what they did on the weekends or something they're looking forward to doing in their class, or something exciting that's happening in their own personal lives, and don't focus on the hardships of teaching. We all know that teaching is hard, but complaining about it's not going to make anything better. Unless you have the avenue of making it better yourself. Like if you're a teacher leader and you can advocate with your administration or something like that, right? I mean, complaining just for the sake of complaining is not going to get anywhere in a classroom. So that's that fixed mindset, right? If you have a growth mindset and look for avenues of solutions, then that certainly helps out. One actionable place that a teacher can sort of really foster this idea of growth mindset, both in themselves and for the student, is in the language that they use in the classroom. And what I mean by that is not necessarily praising a student for innate abilities, right? So you can say something like, "Oh, well, you're just so smart," right? Or "You're so talented that you can do this on the football field or in the choir," right? That is removing all the work that a student has put in to get where they are, right? And by saying you're so talented, you're basically saying, "Oh, well, it must come natural to you." When in reality, that student has practiced over and over and over, in the summers on the field or in the choir room or orchestra room or band room, whatever it is, the theater, right? Whatever skill you may be focusing on, and it could be a classroom skill, right? If they have make 100 on a math test or a spelling test or whatever it is, right? And you're praising them, oh, you're so talented, this just comes really easy to you. That's dismissing all the work that student has done into it. So, a better way to do that is to not necessarily praise the outcome, praise the work that goes into it, right? It's like, oh, I noticed that you have been working so hard on getting this particular skill down, and that is incredible. I noticed that you've organized your backpack in a way that really helps you find what you need when you are doing a lab investigation or something like that, right? I noticed that you've spent a lot of time up here at school practicing for football, right? That's a skill that you're doing. These subtle changes in language is something that may seem small, but it's something that over time can shift a student's mindset and shift your own mindset too about how you look at students and how students look at you and how students look at your class. I can tell you that over the course of my teaching career, I had several students, and I'm going to focus in on one that I usually talk about in one of my classes. And I don't remember her name, but it was in one of my first couple of years of teaching when I was teaching up in Sherman. And this student and I butt heads, on a daily basis. She was sort of on the loud side. She liked to talk to her friend group around her and wouldn't necessarily put forth any effort in class. It got to a point where her grades were suffering, and so I got her in for tutoring, and it was something where she and I were, sitting in a classroom working on something. She didn't have a peanut gallery. She didn't have her group or her posse with her. And, we just did the work. And I worked with her, and I would say things like, I see how you did this, this, and this. That's perfect. That's great. Let's extend that and go on to these next sections. So I would praise what she did and then offer feedback on the things that needed a little bit of help or pushing along. And over time, during these tutoring sessions, she and I built a better sort of teacher-student relationship to the point where even in class, she was coming to my aid with regards to things like the noise level, or if I'm trying to teach and someone's talking, and she would call them out on it. And she was acting very similar to the way that she did before, but instead of it being against me, it was kind of with me. And this is a pure example of how shifting language and focusing on the growth of a student can adjust the whole atmosphere of the classroom over time. This is getting at sort of the what's referred to as the power of yet. And I referenced a children's book at the beginning of the episode. With my son, I read a book called The Bubblegum Brain. Okay, and you are trying to see the differences between a bubblegum brain, which can stretch and mold and grow, versus a brick brain, right? A brick brain is that fixed mindset, and it will only ever be one shape and one size. And the bubblegum brain person is talking about the power of yet. Oh, I can't ride a unicycle yet, right? But if I practice and I keep trying at it, then eventually I'll be able to do that. And in the classroom, that is something that can be said all the time, right? Oh, you haven't mastered kinematics yet, right? Or you're having difficulty understanding economics right now, but it just means that you have a little bit of work and you'll get there, right? It's something where we are always leaving the door open for growth. On the teacher side of this, right, if we're holding up a mirror to what we're doing, if I'm looking at that student in the back of the room that's putting their head down, then I'm thinking, what have I not tried yet, right? What are some things that I can do to help this student access what we're doing in class a little bit easier? Is it that they actually do need a nap because they, closed the restaurant and didn't get home until 2:30 in the morning? Or is it that I need to make some sort of personal connection with them so they view me as more of an important place in their daily life and they actually want to try for me? A story that I have around this, and I can't remember if I've told this in a previous episode or not, but I talk about this particular student all the time. And actually, before I sat down and recorded this episode, I looked them up just to kind of see where they were. But again, a student that I had early on in my career who was a football player, right? And these athletes, you've heard the term jocks, right? So there's a lot of stereotype that goes into a particular student like this. They are good in some areas, not good in great areas. Well, I was a physics teacher, right? So the stereotype was that the jock wouldn't necessarily be good in science. And I don't know if I actively bought into that stereotype. Maybe I did. It was very early in my career, and so I still had a lot to learn. But this particular student, his name was David, and I had him for a couple of years, actually. So he took me as early on in, I don't remember if it was pre-AP Physics or maybe it was AP Physics 1, whatever depends on when the shift happens. And then he took me again for another advanced AP Physics course. I was thinking that he was on the path, at least he had told me, on the path of becoming like a coach, a high school coach, and maybe he wanted to teach science. And I was like, that's great, right? That's awesome that maybe I had a hand in helping him understand that he enjoyed science and enjoyed physics and wanted to actually teach and coach. A few years later, the next time I connected with him, he was actually attending Texas Tech University as a physics major. And I did not see that coming at all. I thought that he was on a particular track, and he completely changed mindsets and went for a reach that I thought was a reach for him. It turns out it wasn't necessarily a reach. But now I'm not going to downplay his own involvement here. I mean, he worked really hard on this, and he got his bachelor's in physics from Texas Tech. He got his master's in physics from Texas State, and is now pursuing a doctorate at LSU in physics. And again, I don't want to necessarily say that I had him pegged at a lower level. Maybe I did at the time, but he has supremely surprised me since graduating from the high school that I taught him, and has gone on to be a really, really awesome physicist, and is doing amazing things. And I hope the best for him. But it was just one of those things where it's just a clear example of, as a teacher, we got to be careful about where we see our students going, right? What track they're on, what career path they're going to be on, because in a few years' time, they are going to be in a completely different spot than maybe where we pegged them. So one of the things that I'm careful of now is to not put any assumptions on a student when I see how they're progressing through my class, right? Just because they're operating at this level now doesn't mean that they won't be able to do great things in the future, right? It's that power of yet. Along with this idea of the power of yet means that a student has to be comfortable with failing, right? They have to be comfortable with saying, okay, I don't have this yet, right? I did this and I was not successful. I'm going to try again and do something different, or try it again and see if I remember it. And I may not have it yet, but I'm going to keep trying. We have this term that has brought up, I think it came around in math education is where I've seen this more often, but I think there's other places where it's come up. But it's called productive struggle. Right? Productive struggle is a place where we want the student to try and fail and learn how to have grit and tenacity and perseverance and all of these skills that can't easily be taught in the classroom other than providing opportunities for students to fail, right, and pick themselves back up and move forward. So productive struggle is a place that we need a student to live in high school and even before then, to learn that they are going to fail, and failure is a data point, right? Failure is a bump in the road on the path to wherever they're going, but it's also a learning opportunity, right? Failure is always a place where we learn something that we weren't supposed to do, right? On the teacher side, we should expect that of ourselves as well, right? If we expect our students to live with this productive struggle, then why can't the teacher also be evaluating their lesson plans and their ideas about the classroom and saying, yeah, you know what, that didn't actually work, or I didn't do that very well here. So what can I do better next time? And have the grit to keep trying new and better things, right? A fixed mindset in the classroom with regards to this idea of productive struggle is going to be looking like doing the same thing every single year, right? I taught with a few people who are like that, who put the worksheet at the front of the room every day and say, okay, here's what we're doing. It's the worksheet for, September 27th, and everyone is going to take the worksheet and we're going to do this together. That was an everyday sort of occurrence. That's a fixed mindset, right? A growth mindset would be, I'm going to try something new today, and I'm going to see how it works. I remember trying something involving a sort of tiered lesson in my classroom about Newton's third law. And I had some sort of pre-test where I was able to divide students up into different groups based off of their level of understanding. And then they would do different activities, and I'd float around the room to kind of help out students that needed a little bit more or push other students who had a firmer understanding. And I was not sure if it was going to land at all. In fact, I was pretty nervous about that particular activity because there was a lot going on. And if it failed, I didn't necessarily have something to be able to kind of call an audible and move over to plan B. Luckily, it went okay. There was probably some things that I could have done better, but it was something that I enjoyed. And that is a byproduct of growth mindset, right? When you try something new, it becomes exciting. And especially when you accomplish something new, you get that feeling of, oh man, I just did something really hard and it went well. I'm going to try something else, right? This is, again, where that growth mindset can live as a teacher. To close out this episode, I want to speak directly to those pre-service or early career teachers that are listening to this episode and tell you that you are an unfinished teacher. But so am I, and so is everyone else in your school building that you either do observations in or that you teach in, right? The veteran teacher who's been teaching for 20 years that's down the hall is an unfinished teacher. Okay? The brand new teacher that's right next to you or you is an unfinished teacher. And what I mean by that is that we are all works in progress. Experience teaches, right? We all gain a little bit of experience every single year about different situations and how to handle this type of student and an activity to do. But if we don't want to fall into a fixed mindset about our classes, about our students, about our curriculum, about our school, then we have to continually trying something new. And if we try something new, that means there's always a potential for failure. There's always a potential for success. And we are always learning because of it. Okay? We are always an unfinished teacher. We are always a work in progress. And that should excite you. That's one of the things that always excited me as a teacher. I was excited by trying to figure out a new lab, and maybe I'm a little handy, and so as a physics lab, I was able to go build something and bring it back into the classroom and try out a new activity, or I got to build something with my students. Right? This was always exciting. So we are always works in progress, and we should own that, and we should be that bubblegum brain with that growth mindset and move into our classroom with the excitement to grow with our students. Because if we're excited, they're excited. And if we push each other forward, there's no telling what we're able to accomplish in the classroom. And that's all the time that we have for today. I appreciate you listening to me pontificate on the ideas of growth mindset in the classroom. The Aggie Teach Momentum podcast drops every 2 weeks, so make sure that you are looking for the next episode on Spotify or linked on the Aggie Teach Arts and Sciences website. For more information, you can visit our program website at aggieteachartsci.tamu.edu. That is aggieteach, ARTSCI.tamu.edu. Thanks and gig 'em.